There is a season in Kalapani when the river recedes from memory for a while, and the land takes over the telling of the village's story. This was that season. The fields beyond the Ghat turned the color of raw gold, mustard flowers nodding under the weight of their own abundance, bees moving through them in lazy, drunken circles. It was, by every visible measure, going to be a good year. Devraj had said as much to anyone who would listen, which these days was mostly Mira, since his own son had stopped listening months ago. Best bloom in 6 years, Devraj said, setting down a sack of seed at the tea stall counter, wiping his brow with the same cloth he'd used for 30 harvests. You'll see. This year we clear the debt from the bad seasons. Mira poured his tea without looking up. And Vikram, does he see it too? Devraj jotted the thing jaws do when a name lands somewhere tender. Vikram sees a train timetable to the city. That's what Vikram sees these days. Vikram was 19, and he had spent the last year of his life doing arithmetic his father refused to do out loud. The price of mustard seed against the price of fertilizer, the cost of a bad monsoon against the cost of a good one, the number of years left in his father's back against the number of years the land would need someone standing over it. The numbers never came out in the field's favor. He sat that morning on the low wall outside their house, a folded newspaper on his knee, an advertisement circled twice in pencil, a factory job in the city, decent pay, a dormitory provided. He had shown it to no one yet. He was waiting for the right moment, the way a man waits for a wound to stop being fresh before he shows it to someone else. His mother, Lotta, found him there, drying her hands on the end of her sari after washing the morning dishes. "You've read that same page every day this week," she said, not unkindly. "I'm thinking about it." Thinking or deciding? Vikram folded the newspaper closed. Does it matter which? He won't hear either one. Kavita heard about the newspaper advertisement the way she heard about most things in Kalapani, sideways, through a student. Vikram's younger cousin, still in her class, had mentioned it while copying sums off the blackboard, entirely without malice, the way children repeat things that are not theirs to repeat. "He wants to leave," Kavita said to Arjun later that afternoon, as they sat on the low wall near the boat repair shed, watching him sand down a plank that didn't strictly need sanding anymore. "Most young men want to leave at some point," Arjun said. "I wanted to leave once too." "Why didn't you?" Arjun considered the plank in his hands for a moment before answering. "Because the river had already decided I belonged to it. Some places do that, decide for you, before you've finished deciding for yourself." He set the plank down. The land might be doing the same thing to that boy. He just hasn't recognized it as a decision yet. He thinks it's a prison. Isn't that what it is, sometimes? A field is a different kind of water. You can't just leave a diving boat unattended and walk to the city. "No," Arjun agreed, "but you can leave a field unattended long enough to forget what it gave you." He glanced toward the mustard fields, gold against the afternoon sun. That's the danger in both directions. The argument, when it finally came, arrived the way most family arguments in Kalapani did over dinner, with the whole weight of unspoken weeks packed into a single sentence. "I've been offered a job," Vikram said, not looking up from his plate. "In the city, a factory. It starts next month." Devraj's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. "You've been offered, or you've applied?" "Both. I applied 3 weeks ago. They wrote back yesterday." 3 weeks. Devraj set the spoon down slowly, the way a man sets down something he's afraid he might otherwise throw. 3 weeks you've been planning to leave your own field, and you tell me over doll. When was I supposed to tell you? You don't listen when I talk about anything except yields and rainfall. Because this land is what feeds us. It fed my father and his father before him. It will feed your children if you stay long enough to have any worth feeding. Maybe I don't want the same life you had, Baba. Is that so impossible to understand? You've broken your back on this field for 30 years, and we're still one bad season away from losing it. I want something that doesn't depend on the weather deciding to be kind." Lotta sat between them, saying nothing, the way mothers in the middle of old arguments often learn to do, not from indifference, but from long experience knowing that words offered too early only get thrown back. Devraj did not sleep well that night, and by the time the sun came up, he had already walked the length of his fields twice. Checking the mustard stalks the way a man checks on a sick relative, more out of the need to be doing something than out of any real expectation of finding new information. He found it anyway. A cluster of stalks near the northern edge had curled inward overnight, their leaves speckled with a fine white residue he did not recognize. By mid-morning, he had found the same markings spreading along 3 more rows, faster than any blight he remembered from 30 years of farming this same soil. "Aphids," said the district agriculture officer, when Devraj finally tracked him down by midday, though the man barely looked up from his ledger. "It's been going around 3 villages this season. You'll need pesticide, I can give you a name, but the good stuff isn't cheap, and it's in short supply besides. Might be 2 weeks before a proper shipment reaches you." 2 weeks, Devraj knew without being told, was more than enough time for an infestation like this to swallow the whole northern field. Word of the aphids reached the tea stall before the sun had fully cleared the trees, Kalapani's oldest telegraph system remaining, as always, faster and more reliable than anything requiring wires. "Half his northern field, they're saying," a fisherman's wife reported to Mira, setting down her empty cup. "And the pesticide won't come in time." Mira said nothing for a moment, her hands going still over the counter in the particular way they did when a memory was surfacing from somewhere old and half forgot. "My grandmother used to deal with something like this," she said finally, almost to herself. "Before pesticide trucks ever came this far out. She used neem and something else, ash maybe, mixed into the wash. I watched her do it as a girl, but I never learned the proportions properly. I thought I'd never need to know them." "Do you remember enough?" "I remember enough to try. Whether it's enough to save a field is a different question." Mira found Devraj at the edge of his ruined northern rose that afternoon, standing the way men stand when they are trying very hard not to look like they are counting losses in their head. "I might have something," she said, without preamble, because preamble had never suited either of them. "It won't work like the pesticide would. It's slower and it's ugly, and it will take every pair of hands you can find, but it might buy you the 2 weeks you don't have." Devraj looked at her the way a drowning man looks at a rope he isn't sure will hold his weight. "Tell me." She told him what she remembered: crushed neem leaves boiled down with wood ash and a portion of soap made from the same lye they used for washing clothes, strained through cloth, sprayed by hand along every affected row, morning and evening, for as long as it took. It was, by any modern measure, an old woman's remedy. It was also, by the only measure that mattered that week, the only remedy available in time. "I'll need help," Devraj said, "more hands than I have." "You have more hands than you think," Mira said. "You've just been too proud to ask for them lately." Vikram heard about the aphids from his mother, who delivered the news the way she delivered most difficult things in that house. Quietly, and only once, trusting her son to do the rest of the thinking himself. He found his father already in the field the next morning, sleeves rolled up, mixing a foul-smelling paste in a large clay pot with the same intensity he usually reserved for arguments about the future. Vikram stood at the edge of the row for a long moment before he spoke. "Mira's remedy." "You heard." "The whole village has heard by now." Devraj didn't look up from the pot. "You have a train to catch next month. This isn't your problem to solve." "It's still my field too, whatever I decide about the city." Something in Devraj's hands stilled, just briefly, at that. He said nothing, but he moved the pot a few inches closer to his son, wordlessly making room at the edge of it. What followed was 6 days that neither of them would describe afterward as easy, and both would describe, years later, as some of the most important of their lives. They rose before dawn to spray the affected rows, while the morning was still cool enough for the mixture to cling to the leaves instead of evaporating in the heat. They repeated it again at dusk, when the aphids' feeding slowed and the paste had the best chance of doing its quiet work overnight. Between sprayings, they picked curled leaves by hand, row by row, the tedious, unglamorous labor that no pesticide truck would have spared them from either. They did not talk much. At first, the work itself filled the silence that words had failed to. But somewhere around the 3rd day, Vikram found himself explaining, without quite meaning to, why the factory job had felt like the only door he could see opening in a house full of walls. And somewhere around the 4th, Devraj found himself admitting, for the first time in either of their lives, that he was afraid. not of losing the field, but of losing his son to a city that would never send word back about whether he was eating enough, sleeping enough, being kind enough to himself. "I never said any of that," Devraj admitted on the fifth evening, his hands raw from the neem paste. "I only ever talked about yields." "I noticed," Vikram said, but he said it gently, the way a person says something they've stopped being angry about. By the seventh morning, the northern rows had stopped their slow collapse. The curling had not reversed entirely. Some plants were lost for good, more than either of them wanted to count out loud, but the spread had stopped, and the rest of the field stood a fighting chance of reaching harvest. Kavita walked the rows with them that morning, notebook in hand, the way she did whenever she suspected a village story was worth remembering properly. "Your grandmother's remedy," she said to Mira later, back at the tea stall. "It should be written down, properly this time, not just in your memory, waiting to be half forgotten again." "Write it then," Mira said. "You're the one who keeps this village's memory in ink instead of gossip." Kavita smiled and began, that same afternoon, the first page of what would become a small, hand-copied notebook of old remedies. Passed down, half lost, and now, finally, secured against the next time the village might need them. The mustard field, when it finally came to harvest 3 weeks later, was not the record year Devraj had promised at the season's start. The northern rows told the story of what had almost been lost. But the rest of the field stood tall and gold, and there was, this year, something in the harvest that had not been there in years past, Vikram's hands working alongside his father's, not out of obligation, but out of a decision he had made somewhere between the third day of spraying and the fifth. He did not tear up the factory letter. He kept it folded in the same drawer, a reminder rather than a plan. "I'm not staying forever," he told his father, the evening the last cart of harvest rolled toward the buyers. "I still might go one day, but not yet, not like this, not running from something instead of choosing it." Devraj nodded and did not trust himself to say much more than that. Some conversations, he had learned this season, were better carried in the hands than in words. That night, the tea stall filled with the particular noise of a village that had come close to losing something and hadn't. Arjun sat near the doorway, listening more than talking, the way he often did. Mira moved between tables refilling cups, her grandmother's remedy now the subject of half the conversations around her, told and retold with the same affectionate exaggeration every village story eventually earned. "You saved that field," Kavita said to her, setting down her notebook for the evening. "I remembered something," Mira corrected. "The saving, that was Devraj and his son, doing the work neither of them wanted to do at first." She poured another cup. "The land keeps its own kind of ledger too, same as the river, it just writes in a slower hand." Outside, beyond the lantern light, the mustard fields lay quiet under the stars, diminished in places, but standing, gold even in the dark, waiting for whatever the next season would ask of them. End of episode 2.